Well, hello, and welcome to Gallifrey's Most Wanted. I'm Ross Aiken. I'm old too.
Do I have to sit next to Genji? He gets vortex sickness.
And I'm Melvin Pena, and I'm Yoo-Hoo.
Someone has to sit next to Genji, and it might as well be you.
All right, I like that one. I'm a Yoo-Hoo fan. I went to college in the early '80s, and we had when Virginia Commonwealth University was punk rock, and my hangover cure was a chili dog from Hardee's and 2 bottles of Yoo-Hoo. That'll kill any hangover. Oh, that's great. Well, folks. Doctor Who, Charlotte Pollard, The Further Adventurous, Episode 3, The Slaying of the Writhing Mass by Eddie Robson. The Doctor and Charley become trapped in a temporal traffic jam caused by time tourists come to witness the pivotal event in the history of Liko. The Slaying of the Writhing Mass, the alien entity that enslaved the Laicans in their infancy. The legendary hero Salin killed the mass with a single stone, setting the Laicans free. But what was the mass exactly? And what if the legend was wrong? Episode 4, Heart of Orion by Nicholas Briggs. The TARDIS intercepts a strange signal, returning the Doctor and Charley to the Garazone system, where once they had a terrifying encounter with the Cybermen, and foiled a bid to change the course of a terrible android-human war. Now the people are going missing all over Garazone Central. The Orion War is far from over, and the Doctor and Charley have landed in the heart of it again. Director, Ken Bentley. Producer, Emma Haig. Executive producers, Nicholas Briggs and David Haig Ellery. Originally released January 2022. All that wonderful information comes from the liner notes in the Charlotte Pollard The Further Adventures box set from Big Finish. Please check out Big Finish. They're good at this stuff. Melvin was nice enough to come on and join me to cover the last 2 stories in The Further Adventures of Charlotte Pollard. Oh, and he's got his Paul McGann mug in his hand. I just saw him take a drink. It's the same picture that I have on the back of was on the back of my work phone case, but I broke my work phone last night.
Yes, artwork by Paul Burley, aka Badge Wolf, on Redbubble. Check it out.
Oh yes, I've got a bunch of his pins. Oh, amazing stuff. Oh, and I've got 2 bags. I've got a carry bag with that, and a little carry bag with Colin Baker. But we're going to be covering that. But before we get started, I'm going to ask, as I do all first-time guests on this podcast, is to ask them their Doctor Who origin story.
All right. Well, first off, Ross, thank you for inviting me on Gallifrey's Most Wanted. It's a pleasure to be here. And let's see, my Doctor Who origin story. It's a very strange and torturous one. I'll try and keep it brief. It more or less, the first time I knew about Doctor Who was in the sort of mid-'80s. We had just moved to where I grew up outside of Atlanta, Georgia, and you would see on PBS, like during pledge breaks for membership drives, they would show bits of Fifth Doctor episodes and a little bit of All Creatures Great and Small. These are just like memories that have burned themselves into my head from like 1983, 1984. It's really strange. And I wasn't a Doctor Who fan at all. It's just like something that lived in the back of my head until really the new series. I didn't really start getting into Doctor Who as a fan until after Lost ended, which is a strange way into it. But I had this pattern growing up where I would be obsessed with one show. And so it was The X-Files in the 90s, Lost after The X-Files, and then as soon as Lost ended, I was leaving academia and needed something to replace the sort of insane, intense, obsessive minutia thing that had just left my life, and boom, there was Doctor Who. At the end of the
minutia. That's a lot
yes,
of
yes, exactly. Just sort of stepped into another realm with a main sort of canonical set of stories and all sort of ancillary material. Like it was wonderful, a wonderful distraction in a time of transition for me. So my sort of first actual sit down and watch it Doctor was the 10th Doctor, and then into the Matt Smith era and the 50th anniversary. It just like grew and grew and grew. So I'm celebrating probably around 10, 13 years at this point of my own Doctor Who, like, obsessive fandom.
And then you went back and watched just Modern, or did you so obsessive that you went back to the beginning?
I went totally nuts for it, especially in that 50th anniversary year. I sort of had an art project where, in order to familiarize myself even more, I went back and sort of watched a handful of episodes for each Doctor each month and made a little illustration of each Doctor for each month during the 50th anniversary. And of course, by the time, what was it, sort of June, July, whenever the name of the Doctor came out and Stephen Moffat dropped John Hurt in there, I'm like, oh, I didn't plan for that Doctor.
Okay, yeah. I remember everybody being so mad, but once he opened his mouth, you were like, everybody went, it's John Hurt. I can't be mad. It's John Hurt.
No, absolutely. But
no,
I mean,
no,
just
I'm a huge fan of the War Doctor stuff that Big Finish has done, both with him and with
Carly.
Oh my God, it's really. Someone asked me, is he just mimicking him? It's like, no, but he sounds like him. He just sounds like a younger version of that character. It'd be just like if you were playing Churchill or Roosevelt or someone else famous. He's just taking on the affectations of John Hurt's accent with his own voice, and it just, you believe it. It's like, I'm a big Churchill fan, as a commie liberal pinko as I am. People go, how can you like Churchill? I said, he saved the world. He was a piece of shit, but he saved the world. And he's a good color.
I dove in head first.
It's good.
Really. And that included Big Finish because, even though my sort of Doctor Who fandom mainline didn't start until sort of 2009, 2010-ish era, like, it was only a couple of years later that I had ACL surgery and needed something to take up time while I was rehabbing my knee. And that was when I discovered Big Finish, sort of at the beginning of 2012. So it's already been, my Big Finish fandom is almost as old as my Doctor Who fandom. And, really, again, like the McGann Doctor, I will talk about him at the drop of a hat. Like, I love this Doctor.
I'm not that way in a lot of ways. He is one of my favorite Doctors. I mean, Big Finish is, like with Sixie, really allowed McGann and Colin Baker to show us what the Doctor would have been like if they had been doing it. With Baker, it's more because he didn't have the best material.
Yeah.
And it was, and he wasn't ever given freedom to play it the way he wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Where McGann is such an incredible actor, and they both have developed this talent that I love is, which era or time in their timeline they're playing. Because Paul McGann, when he goes back and does something with Charlotte, it's different than what he is with Liv and Helen.
Yeah.
And it's it's very subtle, but it's good. And that's when this set came out. I was very happy, because I could listen to India Fisher say anything.
Yes.
Yeah, she's amazing, and it was just good to have these sets back. But folks, as you've been listening, me and Victoria already covered the first two stories. One second. See, all right. I couldn't remember the exact names. We've already covered the first two stories, The Mummy Speaks by Alan Barnes and Eclipse by Lisa McMullen. And today we're going to be covering The Slaying of the Writhing Masses and Heart of Orion. So let's jump to the synopsis and the minutia about Slaying the Withering Masses, and we'll be right back. All right. Since you're the guest, Melvin, I'm going to let you go first. And what was your take on this story?
The Slaying of the Writhing Mass, Eddie Robson, he wrote one story for the original Charlie Pollard run called Memory Lane back in 2006. He wrote a lot more for the Lucy Miller run, but he's a safe pair of hands, and that's one of the things about this box set is that it feels like a safe pair of hands box set. There's nothing really new or special or innovative about this particular run of stories, but they are enjoyable. And like you say, getting to hear Paul McGann and India Fisher again is a delight in and of itself. letting them talk, just hearing their voices. And, this set and the Lucy Miller set, which I compare this one to, are great because they center that companion. And so you get a lot. You don't only just get a new India Fisher / Charlie Pollard adventure. You get lots of Charlie Pollard, which is great. That's what you want after, how many years away from the character, whether it was in those original run of Paul McGann stories or in the Charlotte Pollard sort of spin-off series, which has been in abeyance for a long time as well. Just getting to hear her again is a real joy. Just to start off with.
Yeah, I'm the same way. That's a good way. Safe hands. They don't try to reinvent the wheel. Mm-hmm. They don't try to do anything avant-garde. Mm-hmm. And I think there are a couple stories in here that really shine.
Yes.
I thought The Mummy Speaks
was brilliant.
I think it's my favorite of it because, one, Guy the gorilla.
Yes. Yeah, we can talk about Guy in a little bit, but yeah,
I know, but there's a lot. There's a little bit. There's such a joy to these stories, and it was like, because I was in on Big Finish at the beginning, so I remember when I read Heart of Orion. And I'm a big fan of Alan Barnes' Doctor. Yep. I mean, his books are good, his comics were good. He understands it, and I'm glad they had him come back and be the script editor and write the bookends. Yep. Because I think it was a good thing. I like that there was a mix of types of stories. Mm-hmm. I like the Slaying of the Writhing Masses because it feels very much like an 80s story that you're stuck in an off-ramp in time. Yep. It sounds like a Sylvester McCoy story.
Yeah.
One that you're going, that is, because American science fiction is, and I say this over and over again, is all about explaining how shit works. And I don't care. I mean, I'm a huge Star Trek fan, but there's a point to where there's too much technobabble. I don't need to know that you're calibrating the dilithium matrix to the whatchamajigget to the who's-its to stop something. I just need to know that the engine makes us do this. There's a warp. I need little things. Yeah. Like why, we're in the vortex. That's what they're traveling. We're in British science fiction. Screw it. Yeah. And I like that. And to be stuck on the school trip.
Yes.
And it starts out, I feel, in a lot of ways as a comedy. Mm-hmm. And it's not. At the end, it's a little less funny because, it's not tragic, but, the woman's going to erase herself from time. Yeah. There is a sacrifice. The thing in Doctor Who is he's never going to sacrifice himself. Yeah. Not intent, he tries to, but someone always takes the bullet for him. Yeah. And I enjoyed it a great deal. I like the young girl that he gets stuck with.
Constella, yes.
Constella, she's adorable.
She's very much, for me, a Courtney Woods type figure.
Yeah, exactly. I thought the same thing.
Because it came out, last year, 2022. So it's already been 5-6 years. So I felt like Courtney Woods, the sort of 12th Doctor Clara student who introduces herself as a disruptive influence. Like, I was almost like waiting for that as well.
It's one of my favorite moments when he shakes. Yes. She goes, I'm a disruptive influence, and he shakes her hand. It's nice to meet you, disruptive influence. I loved her. I'd always wished that she had become a regular companion. Because to have him travel with a kid,
especially
would have been a very first Doctor Susan kind of. It would have been a good take.
Yeah.
And she was a good actress.
Yes. And so that was a nice thing about this particular story, The Writhing Mass, was that we got. I don't know if that was in Robson's head or part of the plan, but like an exploration of that sort of character, like how that character would get along in a Doctor Who story, which is it works out great, and it's fun, and she's sassy and fun loving and a good time. But for me, it was a strange choice for this box set. It was a good Doctor Who story, a good Paul McGann story, and a good Charlie Pollard story. But in a Charlie Pollard box set, I sort of wanted more of Charlie and the Doctor, as opposed to, for 3/4 of the story, it's Paul McGann and Constella, which is fine. It's just an odd choice for this box set.
And I want to bring something up because we talked about Guy, and we have him have a different. He ends up with a different companion.
Yes.
In every story, except the final one.
which again is a...
So that's what we were talking before we started, folks, about where this goes. I think it, in some ways, is that Alan Barnes and Nick Briggs, being the nerds they are, going, this gets placed right before Neverland, where the rules are changing.
Yeah.
You know, that they're going to be two of them. There's going to be them and Karis. So I kind of thought that because it is a running theme. You know, he travels with Guy for a while. They could do a couple box sets of the Eighth Doctor and Guy in that little, because they get in the ship and, we were traveling for a little bit. We got back to you. And she's like, what, you replace me? You know?
Yep.
And she does it again in this one. She's like,
I've been gone an hour.
It's great. So I can't think that that's accidental.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the same thing, with the Lucy Miller box set. Not to put too much energy into that, but with these returning companion Eighth Doctor box sets, there is a much bigger focus on the companion than there ever was in their sort of main range runs, which is fine because Charlie's separated from the Doctor means Charlie gets to ask questions, Charlie gets to discover things on her own, Charlie gets to have more agency than she would with the Doctor paired up. But it does mean that the Doctor, like you say, in these stories especially, does sort of get a bonus companion along the way.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I like it when they do that. I like it when I go back and watch old Who, and you can see where they're test driving people for companions in certain stories because they know someone's contract is up, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But it's neat, and it allows them to, as actors, if you're going to get India Fisher to come back to play, she played this character a lot, and it's like she's since then had a child and had a family, and she's still the voice of MasterChef? And does voiceover. I bet her voice sells a lot of products.
Yeah, I mean, well, she's got a beautiful voice, and I do love that that in this story in particular, the Writhing Mass, she does get that agency to go and explore, and she's moving around in the cave with Lowry from the future, trying to suss out like, okay, how do legends begin? How does a mythology, a culture's central mythology take shape? And I like that she gets to be down there and to experience the Writhing Mass and to try and temper Lowry's sort of aggressive attempts to change
blunt objects. Yeah. I'm gonna fix this by smashing it with a blunt object. But that's a natural reaction. I like that. This is someone who knows that something's wrong. Yeah. She feels that it's her duty to fix it. And out of duty, not out of self-preservation, not out of some ulterior motive, just other than that we can't live in the future where we're heading, and I have the ability to change it all at the get-go. Yeah. And knowing she'll disappear. Because I like that scene at the end where she just kind of fades away.
Mm-hmm. Well, her mission is accomplished. I mean, for me, one of the sort of strange, I don't know, sort of out of place elements in this story, if I can bring it up, is there's a weird, I don't know if you noticed it, but there's sort of a weird fixation that isn't really paid off at all on economic disparities and economic inequalities. Like I can't remember if it's the teacher or Constella who asks Paul McGann, who asks the Doctor at the start, she's like, "You're rich, aren't you?" And he's like, "I never really thought about it." And she goes, "Yeah, you're rich."
Because you didn't think about it.
And then there's towards the end as well, Lowry says it to Charlie. She's like, that rich people can afford to, come and see the way that history played out, but there's no real sense, that has any bearing on why she is changing her or trying to change her society's past, because there's no real indication of anything particularly having changed during the coda of the story, when Constella goes back to her classroom and is sort of gently chided for her fantastical imagining of that cultural origin story. But it's just kind of weird. I mean, they do bring it up a couple of times through a couple of characters' voices that there are economic inequalities and economic disparities, but it's not really tied into the story at all. So it's just weird that things like that are brought up but not paid off.
And I got that. I thought there was going to be more social commentary for it, and that's a social commentary. I'm a big, as important to me is, people, we want to talk about race and gender, and it's just, and I think we always have to add class into that.
Yeah.
Because this is Americans go, we're a classless society, and I said, not really.
Yeah.
It goes up and down in importance, but we are just as bad as other countries. Ours is based on greed.
Yep.
Not how you're born, but how much you acquire.
Yeah.
And there is a huge disparity. And I manage people who make really crappy money at the hospital I work at. And my wife, and I was raised by somebody, like that's bad. And I like those stories. And you're right, it doesn't play off.
Yeah.
It's not played off because it's there. And I like that thing is, you're rich. I've never thought about it. Then you're rich.
Yep.
Because that's very much like one of my favorite parts in the Capaldi era is I'm not the biggest Danny Pink fan, but I like the way he interacts with a Time Lord.
Yep.
Oh, you're a Time Lord.
Yep.
There's that classist thing. I'm just a sergeant.
Yep.
I'm a soldier, your time. And that's neat, but I think you're right. It just kind of, they say it, and then there's no real payoff.
Yeah, nothing really happens. It's just strange because, obviously the Doctor is himself coded in this story particularly as sort of rich or privileged or whatever. And of course, Charley in this story, but also, more in the sort of Mummy Speaks, they're continually talking about her as the aristo boy. So, she is clearly from and derives from privilege herself. But, that's, again, it's just the strange sort of thematic element that's brought up a couple of times through this story, through the mouths of the people who are involved in this culture. So it's like Constella, the kid, Lowry, the sort of time agent sort of figure. But they never really talk about, again, why is that? Why are you bringing that up? Again, are you trying to redress inequality in society by doing this? Or are you trying to, it's just a strange thing to invoke something. It's like the anti-Chekhov's gun, as it were. So you bring up something that has no payoff.
Yeah. Sometimes it's, I don't know. I think they just want to kind of give you some the writer will create backstory by, I don't know. They're just trying to show you where they come from in the world in shorthand, but it made you think about it. It made me think about it a little less than you, but I was still like going, okay, this is about, class, and there's a little bit of that. That was it. I think I don't want to bust on Eddie Robinson's
No, of course. We're not being.
But I just think it is. Yeah. I think it's how much more could you have done? Like when she gets back there, is the world a better place, or is it the same?
Yeah. And that's the other thing is like there's no indication there. Because they get back, and the story is still, because even the Doctor says, when a mythology needs to happen, a culture will find a way to make it happen. So even though, by the end of the story, maybe that was the point, is that we're trying to stop time tourism, I guess, because, you can no longer go back to visit that foundational event. That's really the only thing I could see that changed.
Well, it's, because about the timey-wimey of this, what I liked about Eddie Robinson's script is he doesn't try to explain it. Is what's the saying is just the act of viewing an event changes the event. You know what I mean? That since no one can view it, it becomes less important, and it isn't the driving force of their culture anymore. But how does that change the culture? We don't get to know how it changes the culture by taking. It's like if we went back in time and stopped, Judeo-Christian Islamic religion from being created, because they are creations, what would the world be? It would be a very different place. And they're kind of traveling back in time to create, like, their origin myth. But would you have a society? Yeah. You know what I mean? So, that's...
So yeah,
there was a lot they could have explored with
Yes, exactly. And I think that's what I mean. I'm not trying to be hypercritical of the story or of the writer or anything like that. It's just, if you're bringing stuff up, when it if it pays off or not is sort of crucial to my enjoyment of a story as a story. Beyond the fact that, again, yes, as we said, it is super fun to hear Charley Pollard again. It's super fun to hear her interacting with McGann. The relationship between Constella, the student, and McGann is fun. Yes, I mean, McGann's clearly having fun. The lady who plays Constella is obviously having a good time as well, being just a sassy teen as she pleases. A disruptive influence. Like, again, I just love, and I loved the playing out of that. You know, again, it seems unlikely that we will get Capaldi audios at any time soon, but you know, just to see what would that be like, a Courtney Woods Doctor Who episode, like that is, there are many things to like about this story.
Yes, there is. I mean, I enjoyed it. But we're going to talk about the end about the other boxes. Well, let's move on, and we'll get the basic info on Heart of Orion. Okay, we're back, and now we're going to talk Heart of Orion. I'm going to start with this one. I'm not the hugest fan of Sword of Orion, the original. I enjoy it. But I don't want to say weakest, but it's my least. It's the one I just don't think it's as strong as the other ones in that first, 4 or 5 stories. It is a remake, and I have listened to most of the audiovisual version of it, and they're pretty good for like zero budget, even for audio. But I really like this one in a way, because I liked the character that came back.
Eva Jansen.
She was so good in this. And I liked her, and I liked Charley's voyage journey in this a great deal. And I had forgotten when I re-listened to it the other day about her being a clone, being I don't know if that'd be a MacGuffin, but it's the trick in the story. Is she a clone?
The conceit, I think you would call it.
The conceit, that's it. The conceit is, she's the clone, because, oh my God, I've been reading science fiction for almost 60 years, 55 years or whatever, and it's a trope. It's a trope I like, and sometimes it pays off, and I really think it pays off in this one. I like the world that's been created in this Garazone system. Did they ever say how far in the future, how much time has passed from Sword of Orion?
I don't think they mention. I mean, I don't. You would think that they would, because I mean, but it's clearly not that long.
Okay, see, I really get no sense. I would have liked it to have been maybe 100 years.
Oh yeah, I don't get any sense that it's that far at all. I mean, I think at most maybe 4, maybe 5 years out. Because I mean, she had to have the Diva Jansen character had to have time, because as we know, she's sort of feels like is being controlled by those Orion sort of androids to do her mission. So I mean, she's clearly had time to replace a good deal of the population of Garazone with android duplicates. So I mean, however long that takes, but I don't think they give you a specific indication. But it's definitely, that long. Maybe, I mean, at most I would say, 5-6 years, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I've never
like the whole
population with android duplicates before.
Yeah. How you think that would, what's your supply chain issues? I mean, how shoddy's the workmanship? Do you got, everyone's got oh crap, we got a bunch of lazy eyes in batch 7. I like this one. I liked it. It was a nice journey for both of them. And it's a very simple story, and I kind of like that. It's a good Nick Briggs story. Nick Briggs is good with most. I like it when he does a story. And since, he is their cyber guy, and those are his monsters, and that did he direct the first one? It's been so long since I've looked at the credits for
Sword of Orion.
Sword of Orion.
I don't know. I mean, I'll check real quick. I definitely re-listened to Sword of Orion to get ready for this, because I, re-listened to Heart of Orion a couple of times in the last sort of week and a half getting ready for this podcast. And, I don't know that I'm as sort of bullish on this story as you are. it is a Nick Briggs story, which for me, I mean, he's definitely a good Doctor Who writer. He knows how to write a Doctor Who story, a serviceable Doctor Who story, and that's what this is for me. It's a serviceable.
I don't think it's
serviceable Doctor Who story, which for me is just it's a weird choice for it to be the last story in the box set for that reason.
It's not a great ending for the box set, and I will say that. I mean, I enjoyed it. There are things I liked about it. I liked Charlie a great deal, and I like the ending. I like that when she's told, "No, I never replaced you. We didn't replace you. You're Charlie." I like that. I like that the person knew her enough to go, "I'm not going to do that to you." It's kind of what it is. But I'm that way. It's like I'm a huge Nick Briggs fan. I had my nerd moment when I got to meet him for 10 seconds with getting his picture taken at a con years ago. Because he's like, him and Mark Gatiss are, and all of these Doctor Who people, Russell T Davies, Stephen Moffat, David Tennant, all these Who fans that, in that little clique of friends, that it became their professional lives. I love that. And that's kind of like a nerd. It's like, ooh, I wish I had done that kind of thing. But it's like, sometimes I like Nick Briggs as a director a great deal.
And yes, you're right. Nick Briggs did direct Sword of Orion.
All right. I think he's a solid, strong. That means a good sound designer because oh my God, it's constant in this, and I love it because it did make me go back to getting that first disc in the mail all those years ago.
You mean the sort of Garazone noise, the
yes, that. I love that noise. It's only Doctor Who could have that noise in it. No other show could. But when the Ninth Doctor box sets came in, I normally really like most Big Finish. There's some I like more than others. There's some that make me go, whoa, wait a minute. I want that on TV. Why is this script on audio? I'd like, and a lot of the Eighth Doctor is above par. I mean, some of the box sets, I thought Ravenous was really good, and there's some stories in that are amazing. Anything that can make the 11 freak out with fear, stuff like that. It was just amazing. But I thought I really was not impressed with the first Ninth Doctor box set at all. I thought it was safe. It was safe.
Yeah, I don't want to pile on Ravagers because I know lots of, and I don't mean. I hope I'm not coming across in this podcast as down on this box set because I enjoyed
Oh no,
it.
you're not.
But at the same point, by the same token, I don't want to be super sunshine and rainbows about something that didn't really make me enthusiastic. And again, this story is a serviceable Doctor Who story, but but that's what it is. It's a serviceable Doctor Who. It moves from point A to point, it moves from beginning to end in a logical, well-crafted fashion. There's really nothing like joyful about it. And even in listening to the behind the scenes, like Nick Briggs is talking about how the story came about, and he's more or less saying Alan Barnes prodded me to put set another story in the Garazone system, which is fine. And he talks about how it came together, but again, it feels like it was sort of put together to order. Does that make sense? As opposed to like,
it makes perfect sense. And those kind of stories can be are. I'm with you. I don't want people listening to think I hated it or disliked it. I just think it was fun. It hit the spot of a good Doctor Who story. But is it? I will say this: is it Big Finish sets the bar high for itself. And that may be it, because and I also think that this is a good thing about this box set, that every story is very different. You're not. I'm glad Big Finish is not doing the 4 sets of 4 box sets for a while, putting it to rest. Because sometimes it's an awful lot of material, and I like to go back when one's done and listen to it straight through like it was a season, because there's a reason those one and dones that they wedge in the middle, like you would in a television series. That I just need to beat up the Doctor a little bit. I need Helen to get lost and learn a lesson, because I need her to have that lesson learned when we get to the finale of this arc. But to do it in these little 4-set and 3-set box sets they're doing now, they want to give you a variety pack. And I think that in a way this set succeeds in that because they're 4 very different stories. And I understand why you tie this up at the end of the, because at the end of the first season of McGann, they went to the Garazone sector. So I think Alan Barnes was right to ask of Nick Briggs. I think it's a good ask.
I just think
it's
for
a
me,
good
it's like
idea.
a running order sort of issue.
This
like
should be second.
Listing. Like I feel like this story should be first in the box set because I mean it's fine and like it's good and at the very end you have that bring it back, circle around to what is the difference between sort of androids and humans in the bigger scheme of things, which is exactly how Sword of Orion ended. But again, that sort of feels like why are we ending with that here? Like why is that? Because it's a bit ponderous. It's a bit less fun than any like the other 3 stories. Like for me, this story, listening to it, sort of for the third time, sort of occurred to me that Dakota Bly, who's like one of the main characters here, who her daughter, is they find her in one of the pods because she's been android duplicated. It's a cop, and so it's like McGann. It's like the McGann Doctor and Charley hanging out with cops for a whole story. And for me, there's something not really fun about Doctor Who arguing with cops for an entire story. It's just a little
unless
bit.
You're really going to make it
dull.
like a. Yeah, unless you're going to make it like you're going to do an homage to to detective fiction or to procedurals, and then tweak it so it's a little odd. I think this is me as somebody who would put this in order in story order. I would leave Mummy at the top because it's the perfect start.
See, I disagree. I would put Mummy last because it's the most fun. It's the most fun.
I would put it first to get everybody engaged, and probably would have this second. And hold on, let me go back to that list because we said we're going to talk about the other, so this will spark that conversation. Go back. Come on.
And again, I don't want to seem like I'm being hypercritical of this because there are again, it's fun as a whole. Like again, we get another adventure with Charley and the Doctor. You get Charley being even more assertive and taking initiative. She's crawling around in sewage pipes and like finding ways to solve problems. She has that sort of identity crisis when she figures out that she might herself be an android, which for me, like you were talking about foreshadowing sort of what's going to happen in the Divergent arc, you also have that story in the arc. Which one is it? I think the Creed of the Kramen, where she becomes like sort of body horror converted into an insect queen sort of thing. So you again, we have those. This is a familiar sort of image or conceit for Charley Pollard stories, is that that questioning of who am I? Have I been converted into something that is strange and alien? So there is that body horror element that isn't necessarily like in the foreground here, but it's there as well. So I mean, there are fun things happening here. It's just as a whole, it doesn't it feels like it is the sum of its parts. That makes any sense.
Yeah, it does. I'm looking at the order, which is Mummy Speaks, Eclipse, The Slaying of the Writhing Mass, Heart of Orion. You know what? I would put this first because it is the lightest. I don't know if I want Mummy Speaks at the end, except I would say yes to it if for only the reason that Guy is still with them at the end. Yes.
Yeah, no, so that's what I like, because there's that idea of, again, we've had this fun reunion for Charley and the Doctor, to be able to revisit them over the course of 4 hours is great. I just like that idea of, the Guy walking around in a cravat and stuff like that. It sort of brought to mind, if you've heard Time War 2, the McGann box set where there's a Dr. Ogron.
Oh, I love that one.
I mean,
Is it John Colshaw plays him?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
It's just fun, weird ideas, which I love about that early Charley run. It's just like
where they were pushing the envelope.
It was just crazy, weird stuff, which fun, which again, for me, Heart of Orion. I mean, again, it's it's a serviceable Doctor Who story. It moves from the beginning to the end in Doctor Who ways. The Doctor does Doctor things. Charlie gets to have a lot of business, but again, it ends on such a heavy, sort of ponderous note that, what's the difference between humans and androids? But nothing. And Doctor Who's like, well, we don't really have anything else to do here. Like, we're just going to let this society continue on, which is a weird sort of. I don't know if you thought of the same sort of thing, or any of our listeners did, but there's that Zygon invasion / Zygon inversion problem from the 12th Doctor era, where you end up with, a certain number of the population are Zygons. And that's the exact same thing that happens here. When they leave the story, when the box set ends, a good deal of the Garazone system are android duplicates. And, what happens if they ever find out? Don't know. And McGann doesn't seem to care. And that's a weird way to end a celebratory or a celebratory, victory lap sort of box set, with that sort of weird ethical conundrum where the Doctor ends up looking a little bit callous. So for me, I would rather. No,
I agree. That's a good point. That's a good point.
With Guy the gorilla, because it's more fun, and it leaves you with a better taste.
It also leaves you with a fun cliffhanger. Yes. That you could bring it back and then have Guy reappear, and you could do further adventures next time you want her back. I forgot what actor did the for Guy. But hey, man, if that's your gig, take it.
And we were also talking about the strange sort of bringing up of elements in the Writhing Mass that didn't have payoff. Where here in Orion, we sort of do have another weird element that has a weird payoff, which is.
Well, yeah, it makes you think. It's like, why are you leaving it like that? I mean, unless you're playing, because I like the Zygon inversion one.
No, I like those stories too.
I find it's a fun story, but even at the end, it's like, well, you can't have 1 million people die and get replaced. They killed them.
Which is, again, it's a little bit strange that you end the box set on this.
Odd.
But the element that I was talking about is that early in the story, the Doctor tells one of the characters, it might be Diva Jansen or Dakota Bly, that there is sort of gerrymandering going on, and I'm like, well, it's a weird word to use because it has a very specific meaning. And then they bring it up again at the end, and he says it to Charlie, and he's like, anything else that we would do here, to sort of interfere in the way that the society, because she asked that question. She's like, well, what's going to happen here if such a number of the population are androids and they wake up one day? And he's like, well, we've done what we came here to do. Anything more is gerrymandering. And Charlie calls him out. She actually lists the dictionary definition. She's like, you're messing with the territory of constituents in an electoral area. And the Doctor is like, oh, I'm just being metaphorical. And I'm like, what kind of, that's such a
Not really, because that bugged me, because it's in a very American term.
It's such a weird, it's like a dad joke, but a dad joke that doesn't, it's even worse than a dad joke, because you bring it up early in the story, and then you bring it up later, and that's the punchline, is like, I'm just being metaphorical? It's just weird.
It is. It didn't make any sense, because I kept going, that's not a term that I would use for that. There are other terms for reshaping a society.
Yeah, and then you realize at the end that he was just making a linguistic joke, and I'm like, that's not even a good joke.
Yeah. No, it's not, and I didn't get it. And since we talk about gerrymandering in this country right now, because it's it's
a bit on the nose as well. Which again, I mean, that's our context for listeners who don't know.
Yeah,
Ross and I both live in the South, where that's where gerrymandering comes from.
Yeah, well, they do it up north too now. It seems
they do it. Things are the same all
I live in a state that sort of set a rule to change it, and then even the party I'm a member of went, we're not going to be that nice about it. We're just going to be a little less overt.
Yes. So again, it's another weird thing about this box set, especially these last two stories that we're looking at, the Writhing Mass and Heart of Orion, is they both raise the question of, why is the Doctor interfering? What is the point, and why does he?
Other than he's the Doctor,
and why does he?
And that's a.
And why does he stop at a certain point?
Yeah, see, that's the thing is, I like a lot of what Davies and Moffat did with the Doctor, and I say this all the time, is the Doctor lands on a planet, teams up with a greengrocer, and fights the Daleks. He turns people into soldiers to fight for themselves, and I don't have a problem with that. And people go, the Doctor's a pacifist. No, he's not. Pacifist means he wouldn't even ask anyone else to kill for him. The Doctor asks people to kill for him all the time. To save for themselves, because sometimes, or fight. Death is it's a side effect he doesn't appreciate, but is a side effect of what could happen. But these are just like showing up, kind of fixing the problem.
Well, it's more like showing up, being an agent of chaos, and then leaving. Which is more. It feels.
You now know what the problem is.
It feels more like a Fourth Doctor story. Both of these do, and again, that's one of the strange things to me about like this box set in particular, as a box.
Is at least McGanny.
Yes, as a box set, is that the Doctor feels very callous, feels very removed. Not necessarily that he's being mean-spirited or anything like that. It's just the question for me is why. And again, this is a celebratory box set. We're celebrating 20 years of Charlie Pollard, and it's just weird that this is the running order and that these are the stories. That's my whole thing. It's just like these two stories back to back, especially. They're both the Doctor rocks up, messes with a society, and then leaves. And I'm like, again, that I get it. These are, again, I'm not saying these are bad Doctor Who stories. I'm just saying for the context, which is that this is a celebratory box set, for Charlie Pollard 20th anniversary.
There should be a bounce to them.
Yes. There should
be a little bounce, and there's no bounce.
And especially this story, which again is
like, you're going down
this story is very ponderous. Like it's very downbeat. It's very sort of grimy. It's very dark. Again, Charlie Pollard is like, for me, the main image that sticks out in this one is, or the main images are, Doctor Who is like constantly talking and hanging out with cops, and Charlie Pollard is going through the waste disposal unit. I'm like, those are not the images I want at the end of this, at a celebratory box set. It's just weird.
Well, I want to jump back. I want to ask you what you think of Eclipse, and then I want to say something about them as a whole again. What did you think of Eclipse with the moths?
So I really liked Eclipse. Again, I would have put that third, and then Guy the Gorilla fourth. Again, because I feel like it gets a momentum towards fun.
That was my next question, because I think for me, quality-wise, it goes.
Yes.
Mummy Speaks is
the
best.
Yep, easily.
I like Eclipse because it's a great world
build. Yes, it's
build.
strange. It's weird. It has the...
And they spend 10 or 15 minutes at the top without being technobabbly creating this world, and that people are turning into them. And it's all part of this, the ecological... You messing with ecology, which is... It's very Barry Letson. It's very Barry Letzian, and I loved it.
And I like that it combines that. It combines that. This is what I like about... this sort of recombinant element of Doctor Who, where you can, it's almost that sort of Vulcan tagline of infinite diversity and infinite combinations is one of the things that makes Doctor Who so cool. And it's one of the great things about Lisa Mullins' story here is that she brings those sort of Barry Letts eco-terrorist ideas together with sort of the library two-parter. Because that's what happens, right? Is that the moths are attacking the houses because it is their home. It's like the Vashti and Narada live in these books because you pulped their home. And so it's that same sort of idea that you mash those two things together and get a really fun sort of sci-fi, sort of sci-fantasy thriller where you get to see Paul McGann and India Fisher, or at least get to picture them in your head riding around on giant moths. That's wonderful.
It's
literally full of wonder.
And that's what's great about... That's what I love about Big Finish is I can close my eyes and I get to build the set. And I was a scenic designer. So I'm always building the set.
Force-fed sap is just, it's so weird.
It was crazy. It doesn't, what does the bad guy turn into?
She turns into a tree. Which again,
all I could think of is a damn tree in Mark of the Ronnie. The dude that turned into an H&R Puffin stuff tree. I made that comment to somebody, one of our English, what's H&R Puffin stuff? You weren't around in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and weren't doing any drugs, so you have I can't give you a point of reference.
Well, it's also that Greek mythology, Ovid, Latin mythology, also sort of Greco-Roman idea of, what was it, Apollo and, is it Daphne? It's one of the, or Artemis, no, it's not Artemis. Artemis is another deity. But there's a sea nymph or a river nymph that Apollo is courting, and in order to save her from his embraces, Poseidon turns her into a tree.
Oh, wow.
So again, it's just like bringing lots of things together, which again I love.
Yeah, I love Lisa Mullen stuff. I always love her. She hasn't been doing it long too, has she?
Well, long enough. I mean, but she sort of takes the place, and if you don't mind, like looking at the box set as a whole, like if you think about that Lucy Miller box set, sort of the writers are exactly the same. It's exactly the same writers. The only one that changes is that slot, the Lisa Mullen story here in Charlotte Pollard, Lisa McMullen. In the Lucy box set is a spot that's taken by Alice Cavender. Otherwise, it's the exact same authors. It's Nick Briggs, Eddie Robson, Alan Barnes.
Yeah, I just pulled up Lisa McMullen's.
Lisa McMullen. I mean, again, this story is super.
God, he's written a little bit of everything.
And I would have loved, in terms of, for this box set to be as it's written, as it's published. I think it just would have been more fun if it had been Nick Briggs first, the Writhing Mass second, Lisa McMullen's Eclipse third, and then the Mummy Speaks fourth. Just again so that you're having more fun as it goes.
Yeah.
But Eclipse is great.
It is a very inverted order. It is a very inverted order.
Which again is strange choices there.
All right. Well, thank you for coming on and talk about these two. Is there anything else you wanted to mention about the set before we?
Yeah, I mean, just really quick. Again, just not to be too dogmatic about it, but comparing it to if someone were to say if there's Big Finish is having a sale, right, on continuing revisiting companion box sets. So you've got the Lucy Miller box set and the Charlie Pollard box set. Which one would you buy? For me, I would say the Lucy Miller box set, not only because the stories are more fun, and because of the running order, but also because they do something. You were talking about the 4 box set, 64 episode or whatever it is, saga era. What we forget is that the box set era, when it started back with a sort of Unit Dominion Dark Eyes, like in those days, the box set was planned as a mini season, which is, as you were talking about it, but then it became the sort of 4 box set thing. But going back to those roots, I feel like the Lucy box set does that much better. Not only is it, I don't know if you or your listeners tune into the Josh Snare's YouTube channel. He just recently put out a video about cameos or fan service sort of thing, and that was rolling through my mind re-listening to this Charlie Pollard.
I haven't had a chance to watch that.
So it's been rolling through my mind going through this Charlie Pollard box set again for this podcast, and he talks about how fan service is good and how it is not necessarily bad, but how it's less satisfying. And for me, the Lucy Miller box set is fan service, but it is also narratively satisfying, because I don't know if you remember it or if your listeners have heard it.
It's been a while since I've listened to it.
But the 4 box sets, you get to the end and you realize that the places that they've gone, it's like it all builds to the fact that even though they're 4 distinct stories, they all build to the fact that the Doctor has released, an ancient evil. And so the 4th story in the box set brings the 4 loosely themed stories together, and so the box set tells a story. It is a sort of mini season, whereas the the Further Adventurous box set just sort of feels like 4 random stories, which is fine, but it's less narratively satisfying. It is it qualifies more as that sort of cameo or fan service, as opposed to like moving the story forward, which you don't necessarily need. But as you say, Big Finish does a lot of stuff, and they set a really high bar. Which, for me, that Lucy Miller box set, for a return, a celebratory box set, feels like the way to do it, as opposed to this one, which, again, they're serviceable Doctor Who stories, but not much more than that. That's all I wanted to say.
I agree. No. That's a fair take on it. It's like, I like the Ravengers. I was entertained, but I would listen to Old Friends.
Yes.
Again in a heartbeat, because it's just that. And the fan service is a good thing. I'm watching this last season of Picard, and there is a lot of fan service in it.
Still haven't seen it yet, but I'm very excited to.
Oh my God! It's so.
But that's the sort of thing. It's when you revisit these characters, you want to have that that joy, that thrill again that you experienced the first time. And like I loved that early run of Charlie Pollard stories. Like I said, that's where I started. Like on my exercise bike, rehabbing from a knee surgery, like I looked forward every day to getting on the bike and hearing another Charlie Pollard story. Whereas this one felt like a victory lap, and it didn't feel, it wasn't fun.
Give her more to do. That's the thing is, I'm a little disappointed. It's like, because you start so strong. And I think it's not a bad, I know not every story is going to be a masterpiece. Of course. It's just not, especially, God, they make a lot of Doctor Who. People go, they make too much. I said, there's no too much. Be quiet. I remember when there was none. Yeah. It's like when someone goes, oh, we have an 18-month hiatus between shows. I'm like,
there's so much to explore. There's so much to explore.
There is. There's so much. Yeah, but I was like, I survived the wilderness years. I really don't. And I survived the wilderness year because of Big Finish. And at one point, I didn't have a TV. And for a TV nerd like me, I was also at that age where I worked, went out. But I read the McGann 8th Doctor novels religiously. Every month I got an 8th Doctor novel and I got a past Doctor novel, and I read them religiously. I like anything. And I think if I could only get like one kind of Big Finish, and I've cut back my Big Finish buying in the last year just for money reasons, is McGann I buy immediately.
McGann is a no question, and that's another thing. Like again,
McGann, and now I realize I bought some 6y recently. I got to buy some 9th Doctor,
but yeah, for the listeners out there who are wondering, like again, if you love Paul McGann and India Fisher being the Doctor and Charlie Pollard, get this set, because it is. You that's what you get. You get the Doctor and Charlie, and it's worth it for that. If that's your, if that's a thing that you love, then yes, you obviously should get this box set, because it's 4 more adventures with the Doctor and Charlie. If you want something sort of mind-boggling and fun and like challenging, and that's something that moves those characters forward within their narrative, that again, I don't want to make it seem like I'm being hypercritical of this box set, because I enjoyed it for what it was.
Yeah, I agree. It's serviceable. There are great moments. Yes. The Mummy Speaks is amazing. It is it's probably one of my favorite, like, one and done Doctor Who.
100% want a Guy box set.
Yes, I do. I want more Guy. I like Guy to meet all the Doctors. Guy
and that image alone is worth the price of admission.
Oh my God, yeah. I grew up reading comic books, and in DC Comics in the 60s, they would put gorillas in comics so they could put them on the cover, because comics with gorillas on the cover sold 30% more. It is. That's why the Flash has a villain called Gorilla Grodd. They sold, and there's Beepo the Super Chimp. And there's a character, Detective Chimp, that they still use today. He is a talking mystical monkey who dresses like Sherlock Holmes.
Well, that for me, that's the biggest fumble of this box set then. The art, the cover art is beautiful, but there's no monkey in a cravat on the front.
I think they just didn't want to spoil the surprise.
How amazing would that have been, though, Ross? A box set, The Further Adventurous, with those 3 as the team. It would have been a riot. It would have been absolute riot.
It would. I think they got to bring it back. I think they got to. I think we cannot be, and I think Victoria was the same way. I talked to Jeff, and everybody I know who listened to the set is like, oh, but what about Guy?
And I don't want to be that guy, Ross. I hate that guy, which is the guy who is like, I don't like this because it was not what I wanted or not what I expected. I always try to take stories for the content. I'm only saying, and I don't like to be the I'm just saying guy either. But Guy the Gorilla was like, that was the true highlight of this set for me.
It was amazing. But I'm the same way, people, because you're not gonna, when people go, well, they should have done that.
Yes.
But they didn't do that. We're not writing it. That's kind of like saying it's backseat driving. We don't get the problem is when you get writers who start writing fan service for the sake of fan service, and not for, there has to be a reason why this character appears or this place is you have to have a good reason. And I think,
and that's my overall issue with this box set, as a box set for what it is that, again, like you say, it feels like it's fan service. We wrote 4 stories that have the Doctor and Charlie Pollard in them, but that's what it's nothing more than that.
Yeah, we didn't do anything to re-examine or to re-explore or to tweak or tell something a little differently, which is what I hope that, and I think Big Finish as a whole
Yes.
does. I think it's why they do all these different spin-offs to see what
Agreed.
sticks. Because I bought that first Rose box set, and I'm not the biggest Rose fan.
But it's
That box set was
marvelous.
really
Yes,
good.
It's marvelous. It is the most.
It is that, but just with the first story, and the second story is so
Yep.
dark.
For my money, that series that is has a very years and years. It's more so. It's sort of the most RTD script or set that I feel like Big Finish has done. It's the most true to sort of RTD's Hobby Horses, his sort of themes, the sort of darkness of that series.
But the world is more screwed up than
Yes.
you think,
Yep.
people, and you need to be the bright light.
And so again, I don't mean to say that I don't like Charlotte Pollard, The Further Adventures, because it's not the Dimension Canon one. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, again,
because they're different. It's apples and
I liked
oranges.
it for what it is.
What it is.
It's just it's not it doesn't sing,
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, we always do recommendations, so I'm gonna let you're the guest. So, do you have anything to recommend to our listeners?
Oh my gosh.
Forgot that.
What a good question. Well, I mean,
Sorry.
for me right now, I am obsessing over Red Dwarf on BritBox. I have never.
Is it on BritBox?
I've never seen it before, and so it's just like plugging
enjoy.
plugging a gap in my knowledge, visiting it, because it is so ludicrous. It is so silly.
It's glorious British comedy that makes no sense.
So for those all out there who are looking for something stupid, and I mean that with the most
infantile.
Infantile, puerile. There are lots of other aisles that you could put in there. All the aisles in the shopping market. For me, I had tried it before and run into the same problem I had when I first encountered Doctor Who, like in the 80s on PBS, which was like, this looks really bad, so I'm not going to watch it. Which I had the same sort of thing with Red Dwarf every time I tried it back in the day, and this time I was just like, okay.
Oh, and its special effects were 10 times better than Doctor Who was in that.
And so I'm like, I'm going to give it a try, and since I stuck with it this time, it has brought me a lot of joy and a lot of laughter, because it is very silly and very.
They are. The four leads are amazing together.
I highly recommend if y'all haven't given that a try or haven't given it a try in a while. Red Dwarf is on BritBox. It is very, very silly and very fun.
Oh yes, that's a good recommendation. Well, my recommendation this week is if you're not, we're 2 episodes away from the end of Picard season 3, and I know there's contention with what they call Kurtzman Trek. I'm enjoying it. It's Star Trek. It also reflects the time, because if you look at 60s Treks, 90s Trek, Kurtzman Trek, they reflect their times and what they should. A buddy had to convince me with Discovery, you got to get to the second Harry Mudd one, get over that hump. Just get over that hump. And I did. And I had problems with Picard season 1. Don't ever write a serialized story unless you know what the ending is. That's what, and they kind of admitted it. I didn't write the ending first. You got to write I have to know what the final scene is. And the cut and paste spaceship battle. You lazy bastards. You lazy bastards. You've got this stuff on a computer. There's 10 or 15 people that go to every con that work for you that have this crap on a hard drive. They would have mailed it to you. Lazy. But Star Trek Picard is a love letter to Next Gen.
I can't wait to watch season 3. I just haven't got
it
to the schedule yet.
It is a love letter to 90s Trek.
And I missed that out early when I was talking about my the chronology of my obsessions, because my first obsession was DuckTales. Like, I would get off the school bus and immediately run and watch DuckTales. Totally fascinated with it. But after DuckTales, 1987 was I started watching Next Generation as it aired into syndication, and that was my thing. I love listening to people on Doctor Who podcasts talk about their target novelization, like in childhood, their like sort of fascination with that. With me, it was Next Generation and Next Generation novels. So I grew up on it. I loved it.
Yeah, I'm one of those kids that I was born in 1964, so it went into syndication in 71. So I was 5 or 6, and it was on at 4 o'clock in the afternoon in Washington, D.C. for 25 years. So you watch it in a loop. And then I like Next Gen. I have a perpetual rewatch of Doctor Who and Star Trek. So I know where I left off. So I should watch the last season of Sylvester McCoy, and then for rewatch it'll be McGann, and it will be the audio. So that's a lot. So I've kind of paused and went, that's an awful lot of re-listening. But in Star Trek, I kind of at the end during the pandemic, I went, I'm going to stop. I don't even remember where I'm at in the rewatch. I know we're somewhere about to get the third season of Deep Space Nine. So I said, screw it. I'm going to watch it not in production order. I'm going to watch it in timeline order. So I started with Enterprise, and then I kind of put in, when Discovery came out, I watched it, but I kept pausing until the next Discovery came out. And then Discovery jumps to the 31st century, and I went, oh, crap. And I even posted online, I have to ask all my nerdy friends, where do you put new Discovery in order? It goes at the end, right? So it's at the end on my shelf. So I'm watching it in timeline order, and I'm in season 5 of Next Gen. Yeah, because next is season 6 in Deep Space, and I'll watch Deep Space where it slots in order. But the rewatch of season 1 of Next Gen was like dental work. It's so it does some of it does not. There's the really racist one that's like episode 4.
Yeah.
That is just like so racist. Just so.
Is that the
racist.
one where they're competing to win Tasha Yar?
Yeah, sexist, racist.
I've literally not seen that episode in like 20 years, and I know exactly which one you're talking about.
Oh my God! So, but there's some bad, or the ones where they're going to kill Wesley for stepping on the flowers, and this thing where the people hit on the 14-year-old. It's like, oh, whoa. But I'm enjoying it. So I would recommend Star Trek, but I would also recommend Nathan Bottomley from Flight Through Entirety and Joe Ford from Hamster with a Blunt Penknife are doing an amazing podcast called the Untitled Star Trek Podcast.
Now, I've heard of it because I'm a religious Flight Through Entirety listener in Jodie's Terror. But I have not heard that one yet at all. Do you? Should I put it on the list?
Oh, I highly recommend it because basically it's just like Hamster is, where they're watching it and talking. Yep. You don't need to. If you're a Star Trek fan, I don't even have to turn it on. I know they did Spock's brain, but basically they randomly pick stuff. They use a randomizer. I've never heard someone say Jesus Christ so many times in a 45-minute period of Nathan Bottomley with his Australian accent. Every time something stupid happened in Spock's brain, him go, Jesus Christ! But it is well worth it. It's when it drops, it is the first thing I listen to that morning on my bus ride, and I'm smiling the whole way. It's one of my favorite podcasts of all time. I cannot recommend it highly enough. They're taking a couple breaks because Nathan is in Europe visiting Joe and doing some other stuff. And if you haven't listened to Joe's other podcast, Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, it's a watch-along one. It's a lot of fun. I had the privilege of being on it and covering Fugitive of the Judea.
Oh, wonderful. I think, but speaking of guests, like, again, I'm very, very pleased, Ross, and very thankful that you invited me on to talk about the Eighth Doctor and Charlie Pollard for Gallifrey's Most Wanted. I will talk about McGann all day, every day, with joy in my heart.
Good, because I may need you again. So. And once we sign off, I'm going to talk to him about some other things. So, hey, folks, as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you. Thanks again, Melvin, for coming on and helping out. And we look forward to seeing you all somewhere in time or space.